It was supposed to be just another ordinary day, until a call that would change everything. My daughter, who lives with a disability, suddenly needed an ambulance. It was a moment of panic, knowing how fragile her health is. But what happened next shocked me to my core. The ambulance was blocked by our HOA Karen. Yes, a neighbor who decided that her rules were more important than a life-or-death emergency. She stood there, refusing to let the paramedics through, completely unaware of the dangerous consequences of her actions. My heart raced as I watched the paramedics struggle to get to my daughter. The seconds ticked by, and it felt like an eternity. The stress was unbearable, and I could see my daughter's condition worsening. But what she didn't know, I'm a cop. The same woman who thought she could control the situation was about to find out that she had messed with the wrong person. But the twist? The situation would only get worse before it got better, and it wasn't just the HOA Karen who would face consequences. What happened next was beyond anyone's imagination. Stay tuned to find out how everything unfolded. At first, I didn't think much of it. The HOA had always been a bit strict, but I never imagined things would escalate to this level. Our neighborhood was full of rules, some reasonable, some not so much. But they never seemed to cross the line. That is, until this woman, Karen, started making it her mission to enforce every little policy, regardless of the circumstances. It was the kind of petty authority that you could brush off on a normal day, but when it came to my daughter's health, it was a whole different story. My daughter had been doing relatively well lately, but she had a condition that made her susceptible to sudden health scares. That's when the ambulance was called. The paramedics were just a few minutes away when we got a knock at the door. It was Karen, standing with her arms crossed, telling me that the ambulance couldn't park there. She claimed it was against the HOA's no parking rules for emergency vehicles to block certain areas. I couldn't believe my ears. My daughter was struggling to breathe, and this woman was arguing about a parking space. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my temper rising. As the paramedics tried to explain the urgency, Karen just stood there, demanding they move, completely oblivious to the life-threatening situation unfolding in front of her. I could feel my blood boiling as Karen stood there, blocking the ambulance like it was some trivial matter. It was surreal. How could anyone be so blind to the gravity of the situation? The paramedics, clearly frustrated, tried to reason with her, but she was relentless. "No, you'll have to move that ambulance, or I'll report you," she insisted, as if she had the power to decide what was an emergency and what wasn't. I glanced over at my daughter, who was sitting on the couch, her face pale, struggling to catch her breath. My heart sank. The last thing she needed was a delay. It felt like time was slipping through my fingers, and every second mattered. I could see the worry in the paramedics' eyes too. They had no choice but to try and get around Karen, which only caused more stress. Then, something snapped. I couldn't stand by any longer, watching my daughter's health deteriorate because of this woman's stubbornness. I walked over to Karen, my voice steady but firm. "I'm a cop," I said, trying to keep my composure. "You need to move. Now." For a split second, I thought she might back down, but instead, she just scoffed and crossed her arms tighter. "What's that supposed to mean?" she sneered. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me. This wasn't just about a petty parking dispute anymore. This was about my daughter's life, and Karen was standing in the way. The air between Karen and me grew thick with tension, the kind that you can almost feel pressing down on your chest. I took a step closer, trying to keep my anger in check. My uniform was tucked neatly beneath my jacket, but I didn't want her to think I was just some frustrated parent. I was a cop, and this was a matter of life or death. "Move the ambulance." "Now," I said again, my voice sharp, with a calm authority that should have made her realize the gravity of the situation. But she didn't back down. Instead, she raised her chin defiantly. "I'm not moving until you show me some proof," she said, a smug expression crossing her face. She was digging in her heels, playing a power game when a person's life was at risk. I couldn't believe it. The paramedics were growing more desperate. their eyes darting back and forth between me and Karen, unsure of what to do next. They were stuck, unsure of how to proceed without breaking any rules themselves. Meanwhile, my daughter was getting worse by the minute. I could see her struggling to sit up, her breathing shallow, the look of panic in her eyes growing clearer by the second. I looked back at the paramedics and nodded, signaling them to try to maneuver the ambulance around Karen, but she wasn't done yet. As they inched forward, she moved into their path, blocking them again. The tension in the air was palpable. It was like time was stretching. Nothing could move fast enough, and the consequences of any decision felt heavier by the moment. Would we get her help in time, or would Karen's stubbornness cost my daughter everything? Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I heard a voice behind me, sharp and impatient. "What's going on here?" It was another neighbor, Mark, someone I didn't know well but had seen around. He was standing at the end of the driveway, his arms folded, watching the whole scene unfold. At first, I thought he was just another onlooker. But as he stepped closer, I realized his expression wasn't one of concern. He looked angry, and not in the way anyone should be when an emergency was happening right in front of them. "Karen, move," he said in a low voice, his eyes flicking from her to me, then to the ambulance. I could feel a sense of relief creeping in, thinking that maybe, just maybe, Mark would be the voice of reason. But what happened next left me speechless. Karen, seeing Mark take her side, gave him a smug smile. "I told them they couldn't park here, and now this cop thinks he can just boss me around." Mark nodded in agreement, as if he was backing her up. I couldn't believe it. Not only was she refusing to move for an emergency, but now she had help in her petty standoff. What kind of person does this? I stared at Mark, trying to make sense of what was happening. Had he really just joined in on this ridiculous fight? Was it possible that Karen wasn't the only one playing games with my daughter's life? Just as I was about to say something, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Another figure was approaching, a man I didn't recognize, tall, with an air of authority that I couldn't quite place. He walked up to the driveway, looked at the scene for a moment, then turned to me. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone calm, but something about him felt different. I could already feel the stakes rising again. Who was this guy? And why did it seem like everything was about to take another turn for the worse? The man who had just walked up was now standing at the front of the driveway, his posture relaxed, but something about him felt unsettling. I couldn't put my finger on it, but he didn't belong here. "I'm Officer Daniels," he said, his voice smooth, like he'd been called to settle situations like this before. But his badge, the way he wore it, it didn't look right. The words hung in the air as I processed what he had just said. "Officer Daniels." That's when the twist hit me. Mark, who had seemed like just another neighbor moments ago, pulled out a badge of his own. A badge I instantly recognized as belonging to the local precinct. My stomach dropped. Mark wasn't just some random guy. He was undercover, and apparently so was Daniels. My mind was racing, trying to piece it all together. Had I walked into some kind of trap? I turned back to Karen, whose face was going pale. "You're in a lot of trouble now," Daniels said, his voice like ice. "Blocking an ambulance is one thing, but obstructing law enforcement is something entirely different." The air felt thick with tension as Karen opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. It was all coming together now. Mark and Daniels weren't just standing by. They were here to make sure Karen's behavior didn't go unchecked. But just as I thought this nightmare was finally over, Daniels stepped forward and dropped the final bombshell. "Karen," he said slowly, his eyes narrowing, "you've been under investigation for some time. We've been tracking your HOA extortion schemes, and this incident is just one more to add to the list." I felt my heart pound. The stakes had just escalated in a way I could never have imagined. Karen wasn't just a petty neighbor. She was part of something much bigger, something that could ruin more lives than I realized. As her face drained of color, I felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. My daughter's emergency had been the catalyst for exposing a much darker side of our neighborhood, but I knew one thing for sure: it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot.